How we doing, Cedar Brook? Yeah. Hey, thanks, Kyle. I'm not sure where to put the stand here. This is confusing. I think we'll go with this. Feels a little OCD confusion there. Hey, my name is James Brown. I am one of the pastors at this place. If you happen to be new with us, I just want to personally welcome you. So glad you're with us today. In fact, you came on a great Sunday because, as Kyle mentioned, we are wrapping up, we are ending our January series called Over It. And some of you are like, yeah, thank you. I'm over it. This series is too long. Well, this is good news. This is the last one, but I just want to tell you, I have saved the very best for last. And speaking of ending or end or best and last, I've got an interesting thought experiment that I want us to do as we kick off our time together today. Most people that I know seem to wait until their twilight years to look back or to reflect or to evaluate their lives. But the problem with this particular process is that if you wait too long to do that kind of thing, it's usually too late to do much about what is going on around you. In other words, it's hard to right the wrongs on your deathbed. And so what I want to do in the message this morning is to fast forward to the very end of all of us, to project way out there to that someday out there when we are on the edge of the end, and then right now at this moment ask ourselves some very important, some very challenging, maybe even some very difficult questions about our lives. So to push out to the end to ask the questions now. All right, so here's the first question I want us to entertain today. It's simply this: at the end of my life, what do I want to be known for? As you kind of pass on from your existence on this earth, when someone brings up your name after you're gone, what do you want them to think about you? What kind of words or titles or images do you want to come to mind? Second question is this: at the end of my life, why will it matter that I existed? So rather than just kind of taking up space or making steps or taking in air while you're here, is there any more to you and your existence than that? Why was it important that you were here on the planet? And then lastly, here's the question: at the end of my life, and this is for followers of Jesus, why will God look at me in the eye and say, "Well done, good and faithful servant"? What will be significant or different about your life that He will say that to you? Well, all of us hate this kind of line of questioning, right? None of us like thinking about these sort of questions. But I want to submit to you that I think these kind of questions can actually be very powerful when it comes to shaping our lives. In fact, living with the end in mind is really, I think, the only real way to live. Why? Well, because for one, it eliminates regret. Another reason is that it keeps us on track with what's most important in our life. It also keeps us from saying someday, "Oh man, if I could only live my life over again." You see, seeing clearly about that future day can help us set our priorities and our values today. And so I wanted to bring this up, this idea, this topic as we close out this series, because in this life, there is no reverse or redo option. There is no rewind button on a remote control like there was in the Adam Sandler Oscar-winning movie Click. Well, just kidding. He never got an Oscar for that. What he got was robbed by not getting an Oscar for that. And every other movie, Happy Gilmore, Wedding Singer, Waterboy, Billy Madison, all Oscar-worthy in my opinion. Just saying. But Click is a little lesser-known flick. Anybody seen this cinematic masterpiece? Yeah, a lot of us. Good. And so those of you who haven't seen it, spoiler alert here a little bit. This film is about a story about an overworked father who gets his hand on this magical remote control that allows him to fast forward through the boring parts of his life. Or if he can't kind of get out of a certain situation he has to be in, it at least allows him to get picture-in-picture so he can watch the game while he's talking to the person or whatever. And that's the theme, that's the essence of it, and I won't spoil the very end for you, but here's the shocker, here's, spoiler alert, a little bit here. That movie is not a documentary. Just saying. Because that kind of thing, that kind of remote doesn't exist. It doesn't exist. Either, like in the movie, to fast forward, or as we're talking about, to rewind. And that's why I want to say, my friends, that is why we have to work so incredibly hard to get it right, to get our lives right the first time. Now, as I was prepping for this message, I ran across a study that was done a few years back where researchers asked individuals who were in their 80s or 90s or 100s, they asked them this question, and this was the question. If you could do your life over again, what would you choose to do differently? If you could have a redo on your life, what would you do different the second time around? And there were a lot of different answers to that, but some of the most common responses were these. That if I could do it over again, I would take more risks in my life. If I could do it over again, I would live more boldly. I would pursue more of my dreams. And I think these are interesting responses because I think these late in the game responses come to us like this because for so many of us, we get so caught up and consumed with the here and the now that due to the race and pace of our lives, what we end up doing is that we sacrifice the important in our lives on the altar of the urgent to our lives. We end up sacrificing the most important things for what has to happen now. And the consequence of living like that is that we fail to act on or pursue the promptings or the desires or the dreams that God has for our lives. And I would also say, and for the whole world as well. And when we do that, what ends up happening to our lives is that we become fairly blasé in our existence. That our day-to-day becomes very ordinary, kind of vanilla or plain. Interestingly, the Bible talks about this in Proverbs chapter 29, verse 18, when it says, where there is no vision, the people perish. Where there is no vision. The word vision is an interesting word in the original Hebrew. It's the word kazon. Say kazon. Say it with some pizzazz. Kazon. Kazon. Where there is no kazon, the people perish. They perish. They die. How do they perish? Well, they die of boredom. Where there is no kazon, vision, dreams in life, we begin to die of boredom. We die from what author Max Lucado calls the common life. The common life. And living the common life inevitably leads us to the loss of our life through the diminishing experience of a boring existence. But God tells us that it doesn't have to be that way. In fact, the good news is that God actually has a much grander vision for your life than you can even imagine. God has a vision for us, and He has a dream for this world. And that dream that He has for this world is a dream of restoration. It's a dream of making the wrong things in this world, making them right. It's a dream of bringing our broken world back to its original beauty and purpose. You see, that's what God's up to in this world. And the beautiful thing is that He actually chooses to partner with us to make that happen. He invites us to join Him in His work of restoration. He invites us to leave the common life in order to become part of something significant. In fact, He invites us to enter into this opportunity so that we can answer those questions that we talked about at the top. What do I want to be known for? Why will it matter that I even existed? What will cause God to say, well done to me? He gives us an invitation to answer those questions well. And the way that we access the answers to those questions is actually by asking another very significant, another very specific question. And I'm here today to lift this question up for you. I want you, this is why I'm standing up here, I want you to hear this question and wrestle with it. And I'm not apologizing for the question. It's a bold question. It's a big question. And I would say to you that it actually might be the most important question that you ask in your entire life. And just so you know, when I ask you the question here in a second, I don't expect you to have an answer today for this question. But I do want you to start thinking about it and then to begin moving toward your answer to it. And so here's the question. Are you ready for the question? So 2 of us are ready for the question. Online family, are you ready for this question? Give a thumbs up in the chat or whatever. I don't know what you do on there. Anyway, okay, here's the question. Here it is. What breaks your heart? What breaks your heart? What breaks your heart? When you look around your community, or when you look around your neighborhood, or when you look around your city or the country, what breaks your heart? As you look at the economy or the school systems or what's going on with families or what's happening to children, what breaks your heart? What captures your attention about those things? What evokes emotion in you about that thing? What bothers you in this world on a soul level? What breaks your heart? What idea, what crisis, what issue that whenever you're just kind of thinking about whatever, your thoughts and your imagination sort of automatically drift in that direction when there's nothing else occupying your mind. You just can't get it out of your head. You just can't get it off of your mind. What is that for you that breaks your heart? I mean, maybe it's something that's disturbing, so disturbing, in fact, that you don't even like thinking about it. You don't want to think about it, and you tell yourself, like we all do, that I can't do anything about this thing. I mean, it's always been this way. It's always going to be this way. Nothing is going to change. But somebody needs to do something about it, somebody else, that is. Because, listen, I'm nobody, and I don't know nobody. That's a triple negative, I think. Anyway, I don't have resources. I'm too young. I'm too old. I'm too middle class. I'm too busy. I'm too boring. I'm too disconnected. But God, would you please send someone, not me, but someone to do something about this thing, because it is a really big problem. And honestly, I can't even think about it for very long without getting worked up about it. I can't even talk about it with people for very long because I get emotional about it. What is that for you? Because whatever that is the thing that breaks your heart. What breaks your heart? It's an important question, but it's a dangerous question, right? It's a challenging question, but here's something you need to know. It's not a new question. It's not a new question. In fact, the people of God have been being bothered and allowing their hearts to be broken by the wrongs that break God's heart for a long, long time. Actually, in the Bible, we get to see, for example, what broke the heart of Moses. Do you remember his story? I mean, his own people, the Hebrews, were slaves in Egypt. They were captured and taken as slaves in Egypt. They had no rights. They had no freedom, and as a result, they had no hope. That they were getting used and abused by the Egyptians on the daily. And then one day, Moses tunes into the voice of God, and he gets caught up by God's vision for a new free people. And then he decides to do something about that injustice that he saw. And as a result, he ends up coming out of retirement at the ripe old age of 80 in order to go nose to nose with the most powerful person on the planet. Because that's what a broken heart will do. Another guy in the Bible, a guy named Nehemiah, we're going to pick up this story in a couple weeks, but he had a heart that was broken by a wrong he encountered as well, a wrong he heard about. He had heard that the protective wall around Jerusalem was in ruins, and that may not mean very much to us, but for him, that essentially meant that his national identity had been wiped away. His identity as a people of God had been obliterated. And as a result, God's people were a joke in the ancient world at his time. God's name was being mocked by everyone everywhere. So what did Nehemiah do when he heard this troubling news that the wall around Jerusalem had been broken down and was in ruins? Well, we find out in Nehemiah chapter 1, verse 4, he tells us, he says, when I heard this, when I heard the wall had been broken down, I sat down and wept. My heart was broken. In fact, it stayed broken because for days I mourned and I fasted and I prayed to the God of heaven. I mean, I guess you could say that he became bothered. But he didn't stay bothered. He did something. He led the charge to fix the problem, risking life and limb to rebuild the wall around the city, because that's what a broken heart can do. Another guy named David, you've probably heard of David, he had a broken heart as well. Even though he was this young, peach fuzz-faced teenager, he became incredibly bothered by the situation he saw when he showed up on the battle lines to give a care package to his brothers. And when he showed up there in that moment, what he saw was a 9-foot-tall giant named Goliath who was trash-talking the Israelites and their God. David couldn't believe that this big buffoon was getting away with this, so he decided to step up to the plate and do what no one else was willing to do at that moment, which was to take on the giant face to face. And that's what he did. In 1 Samuel 17:26, David asked the question. He said, "Who is this pagan Philistine anyway, that he is allowed to defy the armies of the living God?" David was disturbed by this. He was disturbed enough to go to battle against impossible odds. And he was willing to do that because that's what a broken heart can do. One more story here quick. A woman in the Bible, maybe you've heard of her, her name was Esther. She had a broken heart as well. She was a young Jewish girl who had become the queen of the powerful Persian king Xerxes. One of Xerxes' right-hand men, a guy named Haman, he decided to destroy all of the Jews in the Persian Empire. What Haman was trying to do was orchestrate sort of this mass genocide of the Jewish people, a complete destruction of the Jewish race. And although Esther, who was a Jew herself, her job as the queen was to shut up and look pretty, kind of like an ancient Near Eastern Barbie doll, I guess, she became troubled to the point that she was willing to get into trouble by confronting the king about what was about to happen, a move that could literally cost her her life. But she did it anyway, because that's what a broken heart can do. It's what a broken heart did for her. And so we have to ask ourselves, what can it do for us? What breaks your heart? What breaks your heart? You see, it's an old question that the people of God have been answering for thousands of years. And it's a new question that the people of Cedarbrook have been asking and answering for almost 2 decades now. To find this out, in order to share with all of you, I went to some of the leaders in our church to find out what it was that broke their heart, that motivated, that compelled them to do what they did. And so first I went to Remy, the former pastor, founding pastor of Cedarbrook, and I asked him, "Remy, why did you start this place? Well, what was it about the world that broke your heart that made you want to start a new kind of church?" And this is what he said. He said, "That question's an easy one to answer. What broke my heart was seeing people who wanted to know God but were repelled by small-thinking, legalistic, and judgmental churches. People walk into a church hoping to encounter God, but instead they are met with rules and religion. So they just leave justified in giving up on church." And so Remy, whose heart was broken, decided to start this place for people who had given up on church but not on God. Another one of our leaders, Dr. Jim Walker, who has a unique relationship with the Congo. In fact, he's been there just under a half a dozen times, his last trip in the middle of a pandemic. Why do you keep going back, Jim? What about this place breaks your heart? Why do you risk going halfway around the world to help the Congolese? And he said this. He said, "Relative to Congo, my heart was broken by the fact," listen to this, "that country was the most dangerous place in the world for a mother to deliver her baby, and that doctors and nurses did not have the knowledge or equipment to resuscitate a non-breathing baby at birth." And so he's partnered up with our denomination and heads back there to train and teach doctors, and has made a visible difference in that area with birth. There's another lady in our church, Julie Stunkel, part of the trips that just went. I asked her, I said, why are you doing this? What these trips, tell me what this is all about. And here's what she said. What broke her heart was hearing from mothers who were giving their children puddle water to drink, knowing it could make them sick, but it was the only water they had. Everything starts with clean water. Water is life. And as a result of that breaking of her heart, compelled to do something about it, she and her husband Lloyd started Honduras Well Projects, where they're actually reversing this phenomenon and giving people clean water for life. Another couple ladies here started Pink Box Project, and I asked them, I said, why are you doing this? What's this all about? Jenny said women not being able to go to work and girls not being able to go to school simply because they have their period bothers her. Something all women deal with. But what is even more heartbreaking is hearing the shame they have attached with their cycles and the shame they carry just for being women. Her partner in this ministry, Heather, writes this: what breaks my heart? Seeing so many single mothers, young moms in their teens with no support, no jobs, and ashamed of who they are and how they can afford to help their kids. I was a single mom for 10 years, and I can relate so much to their pain, guilt, and shame. And so as a result, they started this nonprofit, this ministry called Pink Box Project that goes and makes a difference, that turns that wrong into a right halfway around the world. One more, this is more recent. Nikki King started a Bible study for young ladies, teenagers, and I asked her why. So why did you do this? And she said this. She said, seeing the challenges our youth are facing today and the pressures to fit in with society, I want to equip girls with the tools they need to develop a stronger relationship with Jesus early on in life so that they can experience the blessings that come from trusting that God has a great plan for them if they choose to follow his ways. And so as a result of this heartbreak of seeing too many young ladies head in another path, not knowing that God's best for them is just waiting for them to step into, she says, I got to do something about this. I got to step in and start something that will right that wrong in this world. Now, I show you all these things because, not because these are superheroes. I mean, I have great admiration for all of them, but they're just like us. They're just like you. They're just like me. The only difference is that all of them have allowed their hearts to be broken by the very things that break the heart of God. And so my prayer for this place is that we would stop our lives long enough to start seeing what God sees when he looks at this world. And that we would develop this holy heartbreak about the wrongs that we see in this world that need to be made right. That we would allow our hearts to be broken now and not later, so that we don't have to wait to the end of our lives and say, you know what, I wish I would have risked more. I wish I would have done something about this topic or this issue or that crisis. I wish I would have done something to make this world a better place. I wish I would have chosen passion over apathy. You see, my hope is that each of us would eventually find what one Christian author calls a Popeye moment. A Popeye moment. Not a Popeye's chicken moment. That's very different, but still important. Very different. I'm talking about Popeye moments. Popeye. How many of you heard of Popeye? Yeah. Not all the millennials are on board with this. In fact, I'm pretty sure Popeye is canceled at this point. Let you hear a story. Popeye dated a gal named Olive Oil, right? And she was a real looker. She had some serious curb appeal. Dogs barked and construction workers whistled as she walked by, but her Twiggy-like figure made Popeye's heart go pitter-patter every time. But there was, in their love story, this bad guy, someone lurking in the backgrounds creepily who would try to steal Olive Oil from Popeye all the time. Anybody remember his name? Brutus. He used to be called Bluto. Now he's called Brutus. He got in shape and changed his name. But in the midst of this, skinny Popeye was no match for big, bad, buff Brutus. And so he would just pummel Popeye all the time. And just when things looked lost, it looked like Brutus might prevail in this situation, something spectacular would happen. Popeye would repeat the line that every boomer on the planet can recite by heart. He would say, "That's all I can stands, and I can't stands no more." He would say that every time. That's all I can stands, and I can't stands no more. And after he made that statement, what he would do is he would reach for a can of spinach. He would reach for the can. And even though he couldn't beat up Brutus, somehow or another, he was able with one hand to squash the can and shoot out the spinach. And then he would just kind of gobble it up in one swallow. And then when he did that, he would morph. His biceps would swell to like 4 times the normal size. And then he had the strength to save the day, to rescue his girlfriend, Olive Oil. Right, that's the story of Popeye. And some of you are like, you want me to have a Popeye moment? What are you talking about? A Popeye, what? Yeah, well, I want you to have a Popeye moment. I want you to have a Popeye moment where something happens, you see something, you hear something that compels you to make the statement, that's all I can stands. And I can't stands no more. I want you to have that moment in your life because the world is changed through Popeye moments. The world is changed when we look at the Brutuses of this world, when we look at the poverty and the injustice and the genocide and the preventable illness and the illiteracy and the absentee parenting and the divorce and the alcoholism and the spiritual apathy. We look at them and we see one that resonates at a soul level and we say, that's all I can stand. Can't stands no more. And when we get brokenhearted by what breaks the heart of God, His Spirit takes us and does kind of this spinach-like work within us and through us. But it starts with the heart because it takes a broken heart to make that kind of difference. It takes a broken heart to change the world. But once we have that broken heart, we have to then have the courage to take action, to step up and to step out in order to do something about it. So let me end where I began. What's breaking your heart these days? What's breaking your heart? You see, my prayer for you is that you would figure it out and do something about it. And that all the way to the end of your days, it would become a passion point for you. And that you will never, ever, ever get over it. Let's pray. God, we pause in this moment just so grateful for who you are. That you have given us this life, not to live in a common way, but to live with significance and purpose. God, I pray that today you would give us ears to hear and eyes to see the things that break your heart in this world. And God, that we would allow ourselves to be broken about them. And that those things, God, would compel us to action. That we would not just watch on the sidelines as these things happen, thinking we can do nothing about them. But we would allow your Spirit to work in our hearts in such a way that whatever it is you're calling us to do, that passion for it is something that we would never, ever get over. God, we thank you that Jesus came to this earth and modeled how we can live. And it's in his wonderful name that we pray. And all God's people said.